Jerry, good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for looking at the camera and not for me. So that's how we're going to be doing this,
All right. Yep.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself, background, where you're from, where you sit, and everything else.
Well, I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, and went to school at Georgetown in D.C., and then after law school worked for the Justice Department in the Civil Rights Division criminal section. So I basically, for 3 years, prosecuted police brutality cases, and then got an opportunity to go to Vermont as an assistant U.S. attorney, and took my young bride from Georgetown, who was a student at Georgetown, just graduated from Boston, and took her up to Vermont for 35 years, where she froze. But I became an assistant U.S. attorney up there, and then 6 years later, they created the position of the first full-time United States magistrate judge. There were 4 part-timers before, but at that point they decided just to eliminate those positions and create one full-time magistrate judge, and that was in 1982. And I became the first and only magistrate judge for 27 years. And then in 2009, my wife said, "I'm going to Cape Cod, where I've wanted to go my whole life. If you want to come, you can come along." So I decided if I wanted to have a roof over my head and 3 meals a day, I better follow along. And then when I got to Cape Cod, the judges in Boston wanted me to go on recall, and I did. And I'm still on recall in Massachusetts, but for the first 4 years, I handled the cases on Cape Cod, the CVB cases, and then did mediation in Boston at the same time, 2 or 3 days a week. And then in the past year, I eliminated the mediations in Boston. The travel just got to be a little bit excessive. And now I just do CVB cases in Hyannis.
All right, so let me back up a little bit about yourself. You graduated Georgetown Law.
I did. Yeah.
When?
1972.
So you graduated 5 years before I did. Were you at the old building or the then new building when you were at Georgetown?
I spent 2 beautiful years on 5th Street in the old red brick building. And then my last year we moved over to which was then the new building. Now I understand they've got 3 or 4 other new buildings down there, but I spent 1 year in the new building before I graduated.
There's a gigantic dorm or apartment building, whatever you want to call it. They have another big building for classrooms and whatever. And our new building, the one we had in the 70s, is still there. It's still being used. Well, we have to get you down there one of these days to do something when you go to Washington.
Yeah, I've seen it, but I haven't really. I haven't, took a tour of the new law school campus.
Okay. And when you were at Vermont, you said in Burlington, I'm going to assume, or is that wrong?
No, that's true. I was in, my position as assistant U.S. attorney was in Rutland at the time they created the position of full-time magistrate judge. So, but the position was created in Burlington, which is about an hour and a half away. So for the first 2.5 years, I commuted from Rutland to Burlington. Before we were able to move to Burlington, but for the last 25 years or so, we lived in Burlington, and I stayed in Burlington.
So am I right that you live permanently on the Cape now?
We do. We moved down there in 2009, bought a house. Yeah.
Are you by the ocean?
Not close enough to be in the floodplain, so our insurance premiums are a little bit lower. But we live in Yarmouthport, which is on the 6A side or the north side of the Cape. So we're on they say the cold water side, but the warm water side is only about 3 miles away, and so we have ocean on both sides, and it's a nice place for us, and my wife's very happy.
So you lived in Washington, and you went to Vermont. Now you're in the Cape. Any place in between? Or are those the last 3 locations you've been since?
No, we were in
1970, whatever.
Yeah, no, we were when we moved to Vermont, and 35 years later we went to the Cape, and that's where we are now.
Okay. So tell me, you have how many years as a full-time magistrate?
27 years. Okay. 27 years in Vermont, now 7 years in Massachusetts.
And before that, you were with DOJ on the criminal prosecutions, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So give me an idea generally of what you did at DOJ.
Well, I was in the criminal section, Civil Rights Division, so we basically prosecuted police brutality cases or slavery cases, and some migrant slavery cases, but mainly police brutality cases, and we would try them out of Washington because the police brutality cases involved local police officers in the local U.S. Attorney's Office who had a relationship with local law enforcement, didn't want to prosecute those cases. So everything was prosecuted out of Washington. And I wasn't there very long before I was trying a police brutality case in Denver. And I traveled to a number of different spots, sometimes on my own, sometimes with another attorney. But we would do the grand jury and the trial, and that's how actually I got up to Vermont, because I had a grand jury on a police officer who shot a citizen up there. Went up for the grand jury, and the U.S. attorney then said, "Well, if you're ever looking for a job, I might have one. Give me a call." So I remember I took my wife out to a very expensive French restaurant in Washington, D.C. and said, "How would you like to move to Vermont?" And she was 21 years old, just graduated from Georgetown, and said, "Oh, sure." And like 25 years later, she said, "I said I'd like to try it for a year or two." But at that point, she stayed 35 years.
So where was she from?
Boston.
So she's used to cold weather, or whatever. But
Not Vermont cold weather.
Is Vermont different than Boston in cold weather?
Yeah, there's a lot more snow up there. And I mean, I remember one February, when I was still assistant U.S. attorney, and we had 2 weeks when it didn't get above zero. So it can get cold up there, and generally you have a little bit more snow.
And what's the Cape going to be like?
Well, the Cape this past winter was not bad at all. The previous winter we had 3 blizzards. They call them the holiday blizzards. I think one was on St. Patrick's Day, and one was on Valentine's Day, and I forget when the other one was. But we had probably 1.5 feet of snow. And the first time we were down there in December, our first time on the Cape, living there, my wife and I were sitting around. It had started to snow on Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon it was still snowing. And we were finished reading the paper, and we said, well, we'll probably get in the car and go down the street, because we'd be plowing the streets pretty soon. We'd get right out, because we were used to Vermont, where they'd get the trucks out there right away to make sure all the skiers could get up there and go skiing. Well, 3 days later, when a truck hadn't been by to plow, we figured it was a little bit different on the Cape. And so we don't look for a lot of snow on the Cape, because it takes a little while to clear the roads.
Okay. Now, when you were in Washington, you were going to Georgetown. Where'd you live?
I lived on the main campus for the 2 years. After I got out of high school, I entered the Jesuit order, and I was a Jesuit for 11 years. And two of the last 2 years I was at Georgetown. For the first year I lived in the Jesuit community at Georgetown, and then the last 2 years I was a housemaster in the East Campus dorm. I was still a Jesuit at that time, but obviously after law school I left the order and got married.
You have a very different background than most people. You went from an order to become a lawyer, to become a prosecutor, to become a judge, which you still are now. So how did all that affect you? How did you decide to make a change from one thing to another?
Well, I come from a family of 12 children.
In Boston?
No, in Fairfield, Connecticut. Okay. No. And so, I mean, I was, I think, sort of a compassionate individual, fairly easy to get along with people. I want to help people, and I think that I was in the order in Baghdad, Iraq, teaching for a year when I went from there to Georgetown Law School, when they threw all the Jesuits out of Baghdad. And then it was go to another school to teach for a year, or go to law school. And I decided to apply to law school and went to Georgetown, I would probably been one of the few Jesuits at that time with a law degree. But things transpired when I was in law school, and decided that I wanted to go in a different direction. And
okay. Did you happen to know someone named John Degnan?
I remember the name. Yeah, I can't place him at this point.
He was, I believe he went to Georgetown. He wound up at Seton Hall Law for years. I thought you might have run into each other, because I believe he was in the order too.
Oh, was he? Yeah, the name sounds familiar, but I can't really place him.
Well, there are a lot of Degnans in New Jersey, so if you've ever been to New Jersey, you probably run into one. Well, tell me how your background affected you as a judge? And then I'm going to ask you how you went from your background to be a prosecutor. But let's start with the judgeship first. What did that bring to you?
Well, I think it brought a sense of fairness, of compassion, of humility, and trying to understand, especially on the criminal side, to understand, how people make mistakes and get in difficult positions. And I've always tried to, in sentencing and in handling pretrial detention matters, try to, in a sense, put myself in the other person's shoes, the defendant's shoes, and although have to apply the law, when I always tried to encourage people in their difficult situations, and whether it was a time of sentencing or time of detention hearing, told them it's not the end of the world, that things are going to get better, and you made a mistake, and I've always tried to have empathy towards other people and try to, as I say, put myself in their shoes.
And then out of law school, you became a prosecutor.
Yeah, well, my background was probably on the prosecutorial side. Back then, I mean, it was a different. I was born in '43, and between '43 and '70s, the country was sort of, I was brought up in a way that you followed the law. I mean, you did what you were told. You did what your parents told you what to do. And I always had a sense that we are a country of laws, and that should be enforced, and that when people violate the law, there should be a consequence. As I was brought up saying, when you do something wrong, there should be a consequence. So I guess that's what was my mindset when I decided to become a prosecutor.
We were brought up around the same time, so we went through the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. We went through NAM. Yeah. And the protests and everything else. Did that affect you in any way, your decision to become a lawyer at some point, or a prosecutor, or a judge?
I don't think so, because that, I was in the Jesuit order until '72, and when the whole protest movement was started, I was either stuck up in the Berkshires praying, or I was wearing a black robe around, and I wasn't really. I can't say I was part of the protest movement. I just didn't feel part of it because I was in a different situation.
Well, you bring a lot to becoming a judge. Obviously, you've got your history in the order. You have the thoughts you had as a priest. You're bringing in, sounds to me, your empathy and your compassion to people. What did you like the least, though, about being a judge?
Well, I suppose it's on the flip side of what I said, having to lock people up. I didn't really, it's not a pleasant thing to have to tell somebody that they're going to go to jail, and when the whole issue of detention pending trial came in, when really that was almost the rule, not the exception. Some people you'd have to lock them up for a period of time, a long period of time before they went to trial. And I did not like to do that, separate from their families. However, it was part of the job, and I had to accept that it was part of the job. But I think that was the hard part, and also having to make this. I think one of the hard parts of the job that I always found is, in close cases, having to make a decision. I mean, you just have to do it and move on to another case. And at the beginning, when I became a judge, you like to look at both sides of an issue. And the hard part is sometimes having to make a decision on a real close case. But I found out after I get over the initial hurdle of how do I rule, so you have to make a decision, do it, and move on to the next case, and there's always the next case.
Let me back up a little bit to when you went to the U.S. Attorney's office in Vermont. Did you have one area you worked on, or was that a small enough office that you were given any one of a number of things to do?
No, back then we had probably 4 assistants in the whole state, so we worked on everything. We worked on criminal trials, to Social Security cases, to personal injury cases involving the government. So whatever came in, we didn't really have an expertise or an area, because the office was small enough so that you would, so you worked on both criminal and civil and anything else in between. Yeah.
What did you enjoy the most about that job?
trials. You
How
know, I
many
mean,
trials did you do?
Oh, you know, Vermont is a pretty small state, but I probably tried maybe 4 or 5 cases a year. I mean, I began in the office on a Monday. I think I showed up on a Monday, and I was trying a case the following Monday. File was thrown on my desk and said you're going to trial next week because the guy you replaced, you know, it's his trial. So there I was, having to get up to speed on the case, which was good. I mean, but I always liked that. One of the things I enjoyed now, I did enjoy about the changes in the work of a magistrate judge is the increase in the number of trials when they created a position of full-time magistrate judge and the expansion of authority. Because having tried a number of cases, having enjoyed trials, to go back into a situation where you get, you know, 1 trial a year was a little bit difficult. But I would say, since I was the only magistrate judge in Vermont, I worked with, I think, 6 or 8 district judges, and they gave me full authority. I was on the trial wheel. I get 10% of the civil cases got filed were automatically sent to me. So I would try maybe, as a judge, probably 4 or 5, 6 cases a year, both jury and non-jury, and it's always fun because I found that if you go a period of time and you don't try a case, it would take me about 15 or 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour, to get into the rhythm of the trial so that you could anticipate the objection that the lawyer would make before he would make the objection. He or she would make the objection, and you know what your answer would be. But if you didn't do it for a little while, it would take a little while just to get to that point again, and I really enjoyed that part of it.
Well, how many trials did you have as an AUSA in Vermont?
As I say, I was there for 6 years. I probably had probably 15, 20 trials. I mean, because up there we had the border with Canada, so you'd have some immigration cases, drug cases coming across the border. And then we'd have Vermont, you know, we had a few, I had sort of an espionage case up there. There was a big facility up there called Space Research Corporation, and they were selling rockets that would go, they could shoot from Canada down to the Bahamas. They were selling them to Israel, and we had a prosecution. Some of the 2 principals went to jail, but it was a very long investigation, but very interesting. So we had some interesting things that weren't, you know, just run-of-the-mill cases.
So you tried jury and non-jury cases
sure.
in AUSA?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And obviously when you were a magistrate judge, you tried jury and non-jury cases.
Right.
What did you enjoy the most, jury or non-jury?
All jury cases, you know, going to have to do quite as much work in a sense because the jury is going to be the finder of fact. And I always enjoy seeing the involvement of ordinary citizens in the jury system. One of the practices we always had up there when we tried a jury cases, the judges always went back in the jury room afterwards and spent time with the jurors and said, what did you like about your experience? What did you not like about the experience? How can we make it better? You know, what did you like about the lawyers? What did you not like about the lawyers? What did you like about me, the judge, and what could I do better? And they were very candid, and it really helped us. But I think part that I enjoyed the most, I said, was getting involved with the ordinary citizens in the trial of a case and seeing how they go about the decision-making process.
Did you do naturalizations?
Yeah, we did.
Tell me what that was like for you when you did that.
Well, the 3 judges, the 2 district judges and myself, would divide the naturalization cases. So we'd have do them probably once every 2 months. And I always, you know, it's, as we used to say, it's the one day in court when everybody goes home happy. There's no winner or loser. Everybody's a winner, and you see the families there, the kids, the excitement and great joy of the people who are there that day. And I always look forward to that. And it's an opportunity to express on a more personal level my own view of what it means to be a citizen, what it means to live in this country, and to try to reiterate that to myself as I would speak to them before I gave them the oath of citizenship.
Now, when you were a magistrate judge, you handled cases from the Rule 16b conference, I assume, on occasion up through trial.
I would. I mean, I get some cases that were consent cases, so I would do everything. Some cases were on referral, generally they would be referred to me for pretrial work. But see, in Vermont, well, I go back a few years. So in Vermont, we started out. It's a very small bar. So when I first went to Vermont, here's a perfect example. I had to take the bar exam because I had only been in practice for 4 years. So in Vermont, you had to have your license for 5 years, or else you'd have to take the bar exams. So I go up there in April, and in June I'm sitting for the bar exam, the Vermont bar exam, and I think, and I had to take, then Vermont didn't have the system where if you passed the multi-state, then you didn't have to take it again. So I had to take the whole thing. But the U.S. attorney was an old Vermonter, and a week before the bar exam, he took me over to his old buddy across the road, who was the chair of the bar examiners, and wanted to introduce me to him to make sure that he knew who I was. I mean, that was Vermont. I took the bar exam and I passed it. I'm sure I did fine. Didn't have a problem, but that's the way it was. And so there were only maybe about 80 lawyers who generally practiced in court, and you would know most of them. And so we didn't have a lot of fights about discovery, and you need to get people in to resolve disputes. Generally, people got along. We had a rule up there: you talk to one another. If you can't resolve it, come and see the judge. So we had a pretty friendly bar up there, and we didn't have a lot of issues where we had to get a lot of conferences and so forth.
So what would happen when someone from New Jersey or whatever, for some reason, came up
well
in front of you?
Yeah, New Jersey, or a lot of times we'd have people from the city, New York, and they'd be filing these motions for sanctions and all this stuff, and we'd get them up there, and we'd say, now, we have a little different practice up here in Vermont. We'd talk to one another, and you resolve your disputes. Is there anything you can't resolve, you can bring it to my attention. So pretty soon, the lawyers from the big city got the idea that, well, if the practice was a little bit different, you don't just file a motion right away. You talk to the other side, and generally, and we had a rule too. You had to have local counsel, so that we always had a Vermont attorney who had to be in on the case.
What did you enjoy the most on the bench?
Well,
and then what the flip side of that question is going to be.
What did you not like the most?
Okay.
The part I liked the most was being a judge. Just being the person that had to make the decision and have the responsibility to do that. But I felt that I was good at it, and I think it's a satisfaction of knowing that hopefully you're doing a good job, but you're competent and you're good at what you do. And I think any jobs that you have, any person has, you want to have confidence that you're in your mind, you're the best person for that job, and you're doing a good job. And that's what I felt. I was, every day that I went to work, I said, I'm going to work hard, but I think I'm doing a good job. And I think the flip side of that was the part that I liked the least was, I guess it's part of that, people giving you undue respect. Calling you judge and your honor, and we're doing a job, and I think sometimes people can get a little taken up with it,
So you told me you drove an hour and a half each way to get to work for a while,
for
right?
2.5 years, yeah.
So summer, winter, fall, through every kind of weather. Any problems you ever had going back and forth?
Well, I remember one December I was going up to Burlington. I had a trial starting Monday, and I slid down Route 4 sideways for a little while.
Is that common in
8
Vermont?
o'clock at night. Well,
okay.
The thing is, between Rutland and Burlington, there's no interstate, so it's a 2-lane road. And I left Sunday evening, and I'll never forget going down sideways. And then one of the reasons I did decide to move was I can remember a couple of times driving back from Burlington to Rutland after a week up there, and I'd get home, and I couldn't remember driving the last hour. It was just, I couldn't remember passing all those places that I was familiar with. So I said, it's probably about time to move up there.
Is there any one decision or any one action you had or you were involved in that stands out the most for you?
Well, I wasn't up there very long, and when I got a Christmas tree case, and given my background, I had to rule upon whether putting up a cross on a Christmas tree was in violation of the Constitution or not. And you can imagine, given my background, I want to make it clear, I wasn't an ordained priest. I was a seminarian, so I didn't become a priest. But given my background, I had to rule upon whether we're going to take the Christmas tree cross down from the tree, which was a little bit difficult decision. I said, right away, I've got to decide that. But I applied the Constitution as I thought of it, and it was affirmed by the district judge.
Was this in a public park or
Yeah,
a
it was
public space? Okay.
the local town had a tradition on some guy, some serviceman who was killed during the Second World War, that every Christmas they had a Christmas tree cross that they would put up in the town square and put on the Christmas tree. And you know, I don't know who brought the suit, but they sued to take it down, and I wrestled with that. You know, it came out, I ordered that they take it down, and the judge affirmed it. So,
What was the action or the matter you had that you had the most problems with, or you disliked the most, or was there one?
you know, I can't. Yeah, I can't think of anyone that I disliked the most. I enjoyed everything, because you know, you have to keep in mind I was the only magistrate judge up there for 27 years, and it was a unique position in Vermont. I mean, I was very fortunate to have it. I enjoyed the work. But it was time when I retired. It was about time to let somebody else do the job. And as I said, my wife was going to the Cape, and I figured I better follow her. So.
Well, it doesn't sound like you retired. It sounds like you moved your office from one district to another.
Yeah, because I was fortunate. I was very lucky when I got because I wanted to keep working. I mean, I probably would have kept working in Vermont, but the timing wasn't right. Two of our kids had left Vermont. The same two are now back in Vermont, so we didn't think they were going back to Vermont. Now they're back there. But I was very fortunate, because when I got to Massachusetts, they were looking for somebody to handle the cases on the Cape rather than send a judge down from Boston. So I was able to retire and then keep working, which I think is great.
And you do CVB work now, so once a week? How often?
Once a month.
Oh, okay.
Once a month, 9 months a year. So you go over, and it's 10 minutes or 6 hours, depending on whether you have a trial or not.
And when's the heavy calendar, in the summer?
You know, no, it's usually in the fall and winter, because they write the tickets. They write a lot of the tickets in the summer, and so by the time they get processed, and if somebody wants a trial, it's in the spring. And we have the most serious cases we have are the drunk driving cases, and then a few nude people on the beach and things like that. And we didn't have in Vermont.
And that's for the National
Seashore. That runs from Provincetown into Chatham. So the park rangers write the violation notices. Yeah.
You ever find yourself going up to Boston, doing anything at the court there, or are you really on the Cape?
No, for the first 4 years, I'd go to Boston probably 4 days a month to do mediations, in addition to the work on the Cape. But as I said, last March, they decided they had somebody take my cases in Boston who was going to retire and needed to pick up some work. So that was fine, and I don't go up to Boston anymore. There are enough judges up there that they handle just about everything.
Well, you're a young guy, so what are you going to do next? Stay on the Cape?
We're going to stay on the Cape, yeah. But I don't know how long I've been reappointed till March next year, so we'll see how that goes.
Do any teaching?
I never have. When I was in Vermont, there was only one law school, Vermont Law School, and that was about 2 hours away from Burlington. So I'd go down 3 or 4 times a year to participate in the moot court competitions and things like that. But now I don't. I'm 73, and I'm kind of ready to maybe travel and do some other things.
So you and your wife going to become world travelers, or are you already world travelers?
No, we're going to Greece for a couple of weeks in September. My wife was a high school administrator and took 30 kids there every other year for about 10 years, and now she says she wants to go without the 30 kids.
All right, as we're finishing, you commented on some memorable trials you had or things that stick out in your mind. So let's talk about those. Tell me what sticks in your mind about what you did.
Well, I'll mention a couple of things that I'll never forget. I had a case involving an individual who had, in his wisdom, decided to tap maple trees in the Vermont National Forest, which was federal jurisdiction. So he wanted to have a trial, so he came to court, and he appeared in front of me, and he walked into court, and he had some little brown paper bag he had, and he put it on the table there, and of course the marshal's looking around worried that it was an explosive or something, and so he just put it there, and we had a trial, and he admitted that he was tapping the trees in the Vermont National Forest and got some maple syrup out of it, and didn't think it was such a bad deal. He was an old Vermonter, and so unfortunately the evidence was such that I had to find him guilty, and I decided I'd fine him $100. And I asked him if he wanted to say anything to me. He said, well, Your Honor, he said, I don't have the $100. And then he started to go for the brown paper bag. And of course the marshals were getting all excited. And he pulls out this jar in a brown paper bag, and it just looked like motor oil. He said, Judge, would you take this maple syrup in payment of the fine? And I said to him, I don't think it's a Vermont grade A. I don't think I could take it. But he was really willing to pay off with what he got out of the tree.
What happened to the maple syrup?
I think he told him to get it out of the courtroom.
Okay.
Nobody wanted it.
All right.
But the other classic trial was a jury trial. We impaneled a jury. We had an ice storm in Vermont about 20 years ago, and for 3 days you couldn't go out. But this woman, in her wisdom, decided to go to Price Chopper, a grocery store, and in the middle of the storm did a 360 on the walk and broke her wrist. So she sues Price Chopper and everybody else, and her husband brought a claim for loss of consortium and companionship and everything. So we have a trial, and I got 2 rookie lawyers on either side of the case, their first or second trial. So we impanel a jury, and we hear the evidence, and she testifies that how her life has changed since the accident, and she's not able to do this and that and everything else. And they would take trips together, and now she can't take any trips. And they had an experimental airplane and all these other things. And then he gets on the stand and he testifies that life before and after the injury. And he said, well. And of course, the defense lawyer said, "Well, how was your sex life?" And he said, "Well, before the injury, we had sex every day for 25 years, and now, it's too painful. We can't do anything." So, I said, "This is getting a little bit too far afield." And I looked over, and I just realized that I had 12 men in the jury box, not one woman. And I know what they're going to do tonight when they go home and talk to their wives. They're going to say, "What's wrong with you?" But anyway, I can never forget looking over to these guys, and they're listening to this guy testify about what his life was like before the injury. And
Well, what did the jury do?
The jury gave her nothing, of course. But as I say, I just can't imagine what they told their wives that night.
Okay.
But then, as I say, that's a memorable case because of the way the circumstances come together. And as you know, in a trial, you don't know how things are going to work through and what's going to happen. And I'll tell one last thing from a case I had on the Cape, individual charged with having a dog off the leash on the National Seashore. And the guy wants a trial. He comes up from Connecticut. He said, "I want a trial." Okay. And the ranger gets on the stand and says, "Yes, I was at Nauset Light Beach." And I looked down, and the big sign, "Dogs must be on a leash." And I see this dog running around. And so, okay, so I said to myself, well, this one must have a good defense, because right now I don't know what he's got. So defendant gets on, he said, "Your Honor, I just want to tell you what happened. I came up to Cape Cod with my daughter, 10-year-old daughter, and we had just gotten a dog. And we went to the National Seashore because I just separated from my wife, and someone told me that a dog was a chick magnet. So I took the dog to the beach and was running around. And the dog had a collar on. Now, he said, and the regulation says a dog has to be physically restrained or on a leash. And he said the 20th definition in the Webster's Dictionary is a leash is a collar. So my argument is the dog had a leash on. He said, not only that, Your Honor, the dog was actually physically restrained. I said, how was that? Well, he said, you had the Atlantic Ocean on one side, 100-foot dunes on the other side, and the force of gravity. Well, you're going to have to smile at something like that. I had to find him guilty because I'm law and order, and he did violate the regulation. But that was one that I tell now and then is you never know what you're going to get in those cases.
Okay. It was a pleasure doing the interview with you. Have a great time with your wife, and we'll see you later today or tomorrow, I hope. Okay.
All right.